gentleman over here, Lisa, please.
Hello, I'm Joe Petralia from Datamaster. I've got a question I'd like to present to both of you, Colin and Mel. But Colin, perhaps it really integrates the both of your ideas. What it is, would it be possible to consider, like all the points that Colin mentioned are all things that are right on the edge of my mind and probably most of the people here. It would be incredible for you to host a 3-day forum for us all to sit around. I've got lots of ideas that fit exactly there. I'm sure there's 100 other people here who are exactly the same as me. We could really nut it out and give you incredible insights onto how and where to go. If you could consider that, it'd be fantastic.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for coming along to the AIIA the other night. So, look, that's a great idea, but we'd have to put a pretty tight framework around how we would want to do that engagement, because it's a little bit like how long's a piece of string. We could go off on so many different tangents. What we've been doing within the department over the last few months is working with the Hospital and Health Service chief executives, more so than the CIOs, to work on what we call a digital prospectus. And that digital prospectus is about prioritising where our investments should be. As Colin mentioned, we don't have unlimited funds. Queensland voted for no sale of assets and no leasing of assets, which means that our ability to invest in new things in this state will be limited. So I'm quite happy to have a look at that suggestion, and one of my portfolio leads looks after that area of around industry engagement, and that's Kathy Ford. So I'll have a chat to Kathy about how we could, I don't know about 3 days, but we might start with a day and see if we yield a dividend by everyone putting in that amount of time. But we want pretty clear boundaries around what it is we're trying to achieve for that day. But it's certainly, bringing industry together to talk about specific problems is great, and I think it's a good suggestion. We just need to look at how we do it.
So from my perspective, again, I like the idea. One of the things I've been involved with is the startup community, and it works on that sort of a model where, here's a bunch of problems, and I was a judge at the recent Startup Weekend for Health, the first one in Australia, which operates in a model a little bit like that, where people pitch ideas, and it's a little bit more innovative and more small business thinking. But I'd be open to having that conversation, and maybe that's something we can talk to Kathy about. How can we do a bigger corporate version of that where anybody can pitch solutions to us, and they don't have to be one that we would procure, for example, but one where we provide the problem opportunity, if you like, and other people help us solve those problems. We don't have I guess all the brains of the world in solving health problems, although that's how we behave sometimes. It's the not invented here syndrome. So very open to those sort of ideas, but as Mel's saying, they need to be put in the context of government and how government is allowed to operate.
Sorry, can I just get an indication from the folks here? Is that something that would be of interest, if you could raise a hand, just to get an idea, if we put something together? Okay. So there's enough interest for us to have a look at it. Thanks.
Okay, that's a good idea. Next question from down the back, yes.
Hi, it's Michael Tran from Digital Sense. I just want to get a feeling. I mean, obviously the RFS, I mean, it's an interesting idea. How do you plan on, obviously, you're going through to a point where you're going to award someone a contract, but you're going to get 50, 100 solutions from everybody in this room. Each one is going to have certain bits and pieces that obviously there's IP that's tied into it. There's obviously going to be some great ideas that should be used over here and some great ideas over there. How are you going to tie that in and say, okay, well, we're going to award this to someone because they might have 20 great pieces and 40 not so great ideas? I mean, it's a big scope.
Sure. Well, we, being government, of course, we have a plan for everything. So we do have an evaluation plan and a probity plan, and look, I think one of the opportunities out of this process is for us to look at, if we see, maybe not 20, but if we see a couple of really good ideas, would be to talk to those organisations about, would you be prepared to collaborate? Because, you know, this next phase is about designing the solution. It's not about implementing the solution. And, you know, we want to give industry opportunity to participate at every level of this engagement. So it's new for us. You know, this is previously we would have had a scoring system for how many ticks in the boxes you got. We would have looked at your capability, all those sorts of things, and we'll still do that around, you know, capability and fit for purpose. But ultimately, we need to think differently about our evaluation as well. And where we see an opportunity for two organisations to potentially come together because we see that there's potential there, then you know, that's something we need to look at.
Hugh Peterkin from Business Analysts. I recall about, must be 18 months, 2 years ago, going to a PIP briefing that was all about the replacement of FAMIS in Queensland Health. And I also know that, you know, the replacement of your back-end enterprise service bus has been on the agenda for many, many years. So it's always been seen as an expensive project. The question I've got for you is, why would this time be any different? How can you assure us in industry that you're actually going to take this forward rather than it just being a lot of heat and effort and then at the end of the day the money doesn't come, there's no outcome from this?
Thanks, Hugh. I think we should join the room next door. They're having way more fun than we are. Yeah, look, it's a valid question. Now, obviously, neither Colin nor I were here 18 months ago or 2 years ago. I think the key to me is that we have to do it differently, and the purpose of this new co-design procurement methodology is to do things differently. There are certain components of that e-health architecture vision strategy that we have to deliver, otherwise we'll continue to do the things we've always done, which is, you know, investments without a plan, effectively. So let's, you know, I don't have a comprehensive answer to your question other than to say the proof will be in the eating. So if we're back here in, I don't know, let's try and do these briefings a little bit more regularly, but if we're back here in, say, 6 months' time and we've not moved on this particular procurement methodology, then I'm happy to take the criticism. In fact, I'm sure my Director General will be happy to see me return to my former employer.
Can I just jump in on that one as well? One of the things I've worked on previously is it wasn't called a co-design procurement methodology, but we called it more of an agile procurement. And one of the things that we did there was, again, it's this same focus on collaboration. Rather than writing a specification that's hundreds of pages, it's about having a conversation and collaborating. So rather than all of you going back and building wads of documents and solutions that somebody's going to have to read, that's not the intent here. The intent is to go and have a conversation and say, you know what, here's something that would work. And from my perspective, from an operational perspective, if there's something we can do in 3 to 6 months, I'll find a way to make the procurement happen. All right? So the faster we can go, that's what my customers want, go faster, be cheaper. So I'm definitely going to bring the operational pragmatics to what we do with this. And if there are some temporary solutions, I know I saw Paul talking to somebody down the back this morning, talking about how do we do give access to GPs to some of our data and systems. And they're talking about much more innovative solutions than the security, the across the network. How do we do that without having to solve every single problem? It doesn't have to be a gold-plated solution. So that collaborative effort, if you've got innovative ideas that we can do quickly and easily, then everybody'd be happy with that.
Thanks, Colin. Gentleman over here.
Yes, Aaron Farrington from NEC. You want me to stand, Paul? I have to admit, Mel, getting a little bit emotional listening to your planned procurement approach. It's good.
You're not from next door, right?
No.
Okay, just checking.
This approach of a co-design, and if you extend that naturally, you're talking about a shared risk, shared perhaps reward. I guess as an organisation with a very low tolerance for risk and failure, have you got a plan to manage actively the risk elements of any innovation? I've heard innovation mentioned a lot today, and there's an inherent element of risk there. Are you expecting that risk to be managed on our side, your side, jointly? Do you have a plan, or is hope the strategy?
Well, you're absolutely right. Government's all about risk management, maybe not for always the right reasons. Can we edit that out, by the way? So in this new co-design procurement methodology, it has to be a risk share. It will fail if it's anything else. We can't allocate all risk to the partner, which tends to be perhaps the way of government previously, and we need to move to that sharing of both risk and reward. If we don't do that, then we'll just revert to our old ways of procurement, and that's not what we're trying to achieve here. And the issue with this is, I don't think you can have an allocated risk when we're not being prescriptive about what we want from you. So there's got to be that risk reward, that risk sharing. I don't see that there's any other way of doing it.
For me, the risk management or the risk maturity of our organisation is pretty low as well. We've started having some conversations around how we manage risk, and in an innovation context, you can take a lot more risk. In a clinical operating room theatre, obviously there is much less risk that you want to take. And so we should be looking at risk not as a blanket statement that we don't want to take any risk. And I think that has been some of the history. So it's more about taking risk appropriately where you understand the risk, and it requires a different level of maturity around risk management.
Any other questions? I was just going to... Colin, yeah.
I'm happy to take more risks to get off XP faster.
While we're just waiting for another question, I was just going to raise the issue of the actual health industry. So the health industry is the government and the non-government sector, increasingly becoming interoperable in terms of the public, the patient scenario. How does your thinking evolve around the interoperability between the public and the private sector in Queensland? Are you looking at that scenario?
Yeah, can I take that one? Yep. So I've just been lucky enough to go to HIMSS in the States recently, and this was a very big topic where the patient care model is becoming very consumer driven, and we want to treat people at home because A, it's more comfortable for them, B, it's cheaper. Treating somebody at home is far cheaper than a hospital stay, keeping them at home and stopping them being readmitted. So all of those goals from a patient care, they cut across the industry, not necessarily our hospital system. And there's a bunch of industry changes coming. Population-based care is something that's talked about. How do we enable that from our side? It's about telehealth, connectivity and interoperability, because it might be an iPhone or an Android device in the patient's home with a plug that does some sort of monitoring of a patient. How do we work with that device and or send a nurse out or a doctor via video, capture that information, make sure it's on a patient record that we can see in a hospital if they do come into emergency, but the doctor, the GP can see as well, the patient can see. So that whole integrated care model is definitely coming very quickly, and the interoperability is going to be key for that to work.
I might add to that, and I'm probably repeating a little bit of what I said at the AIIA meeting. Have I done enough plugs for AIIA, by the way? So I'll try and be consistent. As you know, there's a national agenda around a shared electronic health record for Australia called the Personally Controlled Electronic Health Record. And that program of work is under review. There was a review done in late 2013. We should see the outcome of those recommendations by government in the May budget. Quite obviously, it hasn't got to the point where there is significant use of that infrastructure and that capability. And in fact, the usage numbers are declining. So Queensland has to have an agenda of a parallel approach to a shared information exchange within the health system, and part of that e-health architecture vision was to deliver that. The only way we can do that is to harvest information from the many different systems that interoperate today, and the interoperability integration platform, that solution request specifically deals with that topic about how we harvest information and we get the semantic interoperability that is so needed across our systems, so that once we have that knowledge hub, then we can share information and we can share it safely, and we can be sure that the information is accurate and is timely. And we've got some of that capability today, but we don't share it outside of our four walls. And we need to move on that, but we need to do it in a way that is meaningful to the recipients of that information.
Hello, Andrew McGrath from Site Studio. So I have a bit of a case example, which is a few weeks ago I went for an interview inside of Queensland Health for a contract ICT role. And during the interview I realised that the broad technical requirements of what was required was something that was very much a good fit and a low-risk use case for what's largely a click-and-flick application platform as a service that I've built over the last 17 years inside the mining construction industry, which is incidentally probably less productivity-driven than the Health Services Information Agency. And so my question is that this kind of thing can save money and it can be a solution that works in lots of different small circumstances. How is it that we go about actually talking to people to try and bring about that kind of change? Thanks.
Look, there is so much innovation out there, and we know innovation exists in Queensland. I've been, on that side of the table where trying to knock on doors within government to say, here's something that we think is going to give you productivity, good value for money. Will be, a good partner, and it is difficult to work out what the pathway is into, who you should talk to. One of the functions within the Office of the Chief Health Information Officer that I'm trying to establish is a Health Technology Innovation Centre, which allows the industry, the IT vendor community, to be able to demonstrate their capability in a safe environment. And when I say safe environment, I'm talking about an environment where you're not entering into a procurement, you're not at risk of either the procurement failing, being locked up in lawyer speak for months and months. You're not at risk of, if a clinician looks at your technology and says, yeah, no, that's rubbish, that you're then scarred for life in terms of your reputation within the state. So I think standing up that safe environment where industry can actually showcase their capability, it needs to be done though within a pretty well-defined framework again, because if you're going to run a campaign and we're going to partner with you for that campaign, so that we can look at, engage clinicians in particular to look at that technology, then we want to make sure we've got a well-defined outcome from that. So I think that to me is going to be the best way for SMEs in particular to be able to have the support of the department to bring your solutions to the front line of healthcare. And at the moment, it's really difficult because you can be sitting on a plane, next to an intensivist, and they go, "Oh, that's really great," and then the intensivist doesn't know how to take that forward. So, we have to provide a safety net for how you can participate, and then show the process and the roadmap then for how that might proceed to a procurement.
Mike Stuberman from government.
You look familiar, Mike.
Yeah, I can't understand why. Mal, I'm interested in the relationship, obviously, you're having within the state and to the federal government is one aspect. We've got lots of neighbouring states. How are you going to handle the neighbouring states as well?
Yes. Government, in my 7 months and 6 days, no, I'm not counting. In my time so far in government, what I witness is that we tend to have, and Colin mentioned it before, not invented here, kind of approach, which is, you know, just if we talk about intra-agency within Queensland Government, the ability for us to collaborate, or the will to collaborate, it's increasing, but you wouldn't say it was, you know, had the energy and intensity that they're experiencing next door. Right? So, you know, we need to move forward with that, and there is a strong will, at least within some levels of Queensland Government, to make sure that there's better collaboration amongst the agencies. At a state jurisdiction level, the same thing occurs. We come together quite regularly as health CIOs to talk about issues, what we're doing, but nothing really comes of it other than our focus on beating up NEDA around the national PCHR. We might have to edit that in as well. So we do come together for a common purpose, but ultimately we need to be much better at collaborating. And my counterpart in New South Wales, Michael Walsh, we've had some very meaningful conversations about collaboration. We've actually had their team, his leadership team, up for a full day workshop to talk to our leadership team about where the collaboration opportunities are. And we know we all have the same problems. The enterprise service bus is a classic example. All have the same problems. Why reinvent the wheel every time? I was just in WA last week and saw what they're doing around interoperability, and they've solved the problem. You know, so there's much to be learnt from the other states. What we're actually attempting to do between Michael and I, because if you think about our two jurisdictions, they're pretty big. We're trying to establish a genuine collaboration environment, which includes an online collaboration portal, where we can share artefacts, where we can share information, what we're doing, and then take that nationally. The Commonwealth Department of Health, that's a different beast, and their agenda is slightly different, but I think we can tackle this problem. And, you know, I'm sure you're part of the vanguard that's trying to do something in Queensland. And I just want to point out this procurement methodology that we're doing. The reason why it's so important to get your feedback on the process is because this should be a model to take to other agencies. You know, this has to be the way forward. We need, and this is just one category of procurement. You know, these are the big strategic procurements. There are many other categories of procurement where we can be much more agile. So there's no point just Queensland Health doing it and no one else doing it. So, you know, we need to move forward with this.
Thanks, Mel. We've got time, maybe one or two more questions. Any further questions of either Mel or Colin?
Yeah, I'm Stuart Fergus from Z1. Look, what's the appetite for Queensland Health to use other panels in the Queensland Government? Because we're an SME, we're on a couple of the panels, but it seems like every government agency wants to go back through the procurement, you know, road again. You know, we're happy to do it, but it does cost us a lot of money. And, you know, great to come up with innovations and do it in a different way, but when it's already done, you know, it'd be great for the agencies to actually consider those first and then go out to, you know, panel if it doesn't exist. So I just wonder.
Yeah, so let me take that one because being new to government, I was want my customers keep telling me go faster, go cheaper. If something's on a panel, I'd rather use it than go and create it afresh. And I know we worked with Mike and his guys have already done some great work in making that information available. And look, from our team's perspective, after I saw all of that, we got the team into our leadership team and said, look, we should not be going out to market for a lot of these things. If they're on a panel, just go buy from them. All right. Now having said that, health, each agency is a little bit different, and so if the panels are not quite right, then we should go and amend the panels rather than, or whatever's needed. So again, it's that collaboration and reuse. The more we can do that, the better. And so absolutely, we are shifting the organisation to use what's already on a panel rather than going through them. Because one of the things, like one of my customers, let me give you the practical example. One of my chief CIOs saying, you know what, I can go down to JB Hi-Fi and buy stuff cheaper retail than I can from my agency, HSIA. And so I think we have a problem with our panels as well, that they are so hard to set up and maintain that procurement cost gets factored into the price that we pay at the end. We should be getting cheaper prices with our scale, particularly as health is a big chunk of a lot of these panels. But yet some of the stuff that's on our panels is cheaper retail than it is off our panel arrangements, all right? So I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on those panels, but absolutely, if we've got them there, we should use them. Yep.
Okay. One final question. Is there a burning question that looks like we've exhausted most of the questions? Right down the back. Coming back for a second go.
Yeah,
yes.
come back for a second. Just a quick one. Just in regards to, once again, this RFS, what exposure, I mean, obviously I haven't read the RFS, so, you know, forgive me if it's all in there, but what exposure are we going to have to see what strategies are already, I guess, fixed and locked in, you know, which ones I guess really shouldn't be touched, or which ones are central to work around? And then I guess how that relates to those three pillars that you mentioned before. You know, you want it to be cheap, you want it to be good. I'd prefer great for health, but good is okay. And the other one is fast. Yeah, how can we, or what exposure will we have to, I guess, what Queensland Health is already locked into, be it by previous budgets, by you know, those sorts of things. How can we sort of see into that to make sure that when we're responding, it actually makes sense, not that you know, you've already gone down a path that's already locked in, and you know, we go and spend all this time to you know, reinvent a new wheel for you that you've already locked in.
Sure. There's many parts to that question, so I'll see how I go. So firstly, on the better, faster, cheaper, you know, they should be principles, and, you know, Colin's talked to that's the demand from our customers. So I think, you know, as a principle or a set of principles, that's how you should be approaching your responses. I think in terms of where does this sit in the overall scheme of things, that e-health architecture vision document, which is in the pack that's part of the RFS, that gives you a sense of the elements that we're going to be focusing on. Now, there's not a lot of detail behind those elements, but what we'll be building out are the current state and target states for each of those architectural components, and then you'll be able to see, you know, where it fits in the overall scheme of things and how those things interoperate. The other thing that we need to share with you then is the prioritisation of that, and we will do that. We're just finalising this digital prospectus that the department has embarked on, which has strong support from the chief executives of the HHSs, very important. And we need to prioritise at the infrastructure, at those e-enabler levels, between, you know, Colin and I and with our stakeholders. We need to prioritise where we're going to be coming to market with those requests for solutions. So this is the first of what will hopefully be many, and as Colin said, he keeps knocking on my door, where's the roadmap for this, you know, be patient. So, you know, developing those roadmaps actually requires us to do a lot of stakeholder engagement, and that's not something we've always done in the past, and we're still feeling our way, to be honest, around how we can do that most efficiently. But you know, we will, that e-health architecture vision is very much the master plan at a fairly light level. It's not a plan as such, but you know, it's kind of like the city master plan of where our procurements will be directed, and the digital prospectus is all consistent with that. So is that a hint? The next group is on their way in. Yeah. So we'll feed as much information as we're able to moving forward.
Just on that then, I mean, obviously the thing in the room, where does CERNA fit in all of this? I mean, obviously there's been a lot of talk about that coming in, coming out. I mean,
sure. So CERNA is part of the. You might recall on that slide, that one-page diagram, there are. In terms of integrated clinical systems, there are two trajectories that we're going to support. So one is an integrated EMR trajectory, which is CERNA as a platform, but we're not restricting it just to CERNA, okay? Because the hospital and health services need to be free to, you know, chart their own course within an architectural, you know, an enterprise architecture view. And the other is the other trajectory is the best of breed, multi-breed approach, which would see different vendors, best of breed products interoperating within a clinical framework. So that all those, you know, they're all there in there. They're just not specified in exquisite detail just yet.
So thanks both Mel and Colin. We might bring the formal part of this morning's briefing session to a close at this point. And I'd like you to join with me in thanking both Malcolm and Colin for taking us through that presentation. So
can we just get a big whoop for the next room so that they know we're having fun?
So everyone's got a little bit of homework to do. Sounds like industry's got a fair bit of reading, although, you know, not as heavy as usual, but some degree of reading to get through, and you guys will have a look at the opportunity that was presented in the first question this morning. There is now some tea and coffee and opportunity to meet one another and some of our speakers and Colin and Malcolm's team outside, and we look forward to you at our next briefing in the very near future. Thank you.